Page 143, the Administrative Order. Dearly beloved brethren in Abdul-Baha, with the ascension of Baha'u'lláh, the day star of divine guidance which, as foretold by Sheikh Ahmad and Sayyid Kazim, had risen in Shiraz, and while pursuing its westward course had mounted its zenith in Adrianople, had finally sunk below the horizon of Akka, never to rise again ere the complete revolution of 1,000 years. The setting of so effulgent an orb brought to the definite termination the period of divine revelation, the initial and most vitalizing stage in the Baha'i era. Inaugurated by the Bab, culminating in Baha'u'lláh, anticipated and extolled by the entire company of the prophets of this great prophetic cycle, this period has, except for the short interval between the Bab's martyrdom and Baha'u'llah's shaking experience in the Siyachal of Tehran, been characterized by almost 50 years of continuous and progressive revelation, a period by which its duration and fecundity must be regarded as unparalleled in the entire field of the world's spiritual history. The passing of Abdul-Baha, on the other hand, marks the closing of the heroic and apostolic age of the same dispensation, that primitive period of our faith, the splendors of which can never be rivaled, much less be eclipsed, by the magnificence that must needs distinguish the future victories of the Baha'u'llah's revelation. For neither the achievements of the champion builders of the present-day institutions of the faith of Baha'u'lláh, nor the tumultuous triumphs which the heroes of its golden age will in the coming days succeed in winning, can measure with or be included within the same category as the wondrous works associated with the names of those who have generated its very life and laid its pristine foundations. That first and creative age of the Baha'i era must, by its very nature, stand above and apart from the formative period into which we have entered, and the golden age destined to succeed it. Abdul-Baha, who incarnates an institution for which we can find no parallel whatsoever in any of the world's recognized religious systems, may be said to have closed the age to which he himself belonged, and opened the one in which we are now laboring. His will and testament should thus be regarded as the perpetual, the indissoluble link which the mind of him who is the mystery of God has conceived in order to ensure the continuity of the three ages that constitute the component parts of the Baha'i dispensation. The period in which the seed of the faith had been slowly germinating is thus intertwined both with the one which must witness its effervescence and the subsequent age in which that seed will have finally yielded its golden fruit. The creative energies released by the law of Baha'u'lláh, permeating and evolving within the mind of Abdul-Baha, have, by their very impact and close interaction, given birth to an instrument which may be viewed as the charter of the New World Order, which is at once the glory and the promise of the most great dispensation. The will may thus be acclaimed as the inevitable offspring resulting from that mystic intercourse between him who communicated the generating influence of his divine purpose and the one who was its vehicle and chosen recipient. Being the child of the covenant, the heir of both the originator and the interpreter of the law of God, the will and testament of Abdul-Baha can no more be divorced from him who supplied the original and motivating impulse than from the one who ultimately conceived it. Baha'u'llah's inscrutable purpose, we must ever bear in mind, has been so thoroughly infused into the conduct of Abdul-Baha, and their motives have been so closely wedded together, that the mere attempt to disassociate the teachings of the former from any system which the ideal exemplar of those same teachings has established would amount to a repudiation of one of the most sacred and basic truths of the faith. The administrative order, which ever since Abdul-Baha's ascension has evolved and is taking shape under our very eyes in no fewer than 40 countries of the world, may be considered as the framework of the will itself, the inviolable stronghold wherein this newborn child is being nurtured and developed. This administrative order, as it expands and consolidates itself, will no doubt manifest the potentialities and reveal the full implications of this momentous document, this most remarkable expression of the will of one of the most remarkable figures of the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh. It will, as its component parts, its organic institutions, begin to function with efficiency and vigor, assert its claim and demonstrate its capacity to be regarded not only as the nucleus, but the very pattern of the New World Order, destined to embrace in the fullness of time the whole of mankind. It should be noted in this connection that this administrative order is fundamentally different from anything that any prophet has previously established, inasmuch as Baha'u'lláh has himself revealed its principles, established its institutions, appointed the person to interpret his word, and confer the necessary authority on the body destined to supplement and apply his legislative ordinances. Therein lies the secret of its strength, its fundamental distinction, and the guarantee against disintegration and schism. Nowhere in the sacred scriptures of any of the world's religious systems, nor even in the writings of the inaugurator of the Bahá'í dispensation, do we find any provisions establishing a covenant or providing for an administrative order that can compare in scope and authority with those that lie at the very basis of the Bahá'í dispensation. Has either Christianity or Islam, to take as an instance two of the most widely diffused and outstanding among the world's recognized religions, anything to offer that can measure with or be regarded as equivalent to either the Book of Baha'u'llah's Covenant or to the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha? Does the text of either the Gospel or the Quran confer sufficient authority upon those leaders and councils that have claimed the right and assumed the function of interpreting the provisions of their sacred scriptures and of administering the affairs of their respective communities? Could Peter, the admitted chief of the apostles, or the Imam Ali, the cousin and legitimate successor of the Prophet, produce in support of the primacy with which both had been invested, written and explicit affirmations from Christ and Muhammad that could have silenced those who either among their contemporaries or in a later age have repudiated their authority, and by their action precipitated the schisms that persist until the present day? Where, we may confidently ask, in the recorded sayings of Jesus Christ, whether in the matter of succession or in the provision of a set of specific laws and clearly defined administrative ordinances, as distinguished from purely spiritual principles, can we find anything approaching the detailed injunctions, laws, and warnings that abound in the authenticated utterances of both Baha'u'lláh and Abdul-Baha? Can any passage of the Quran, which in respect to its legal code, its administrative and devotional ordinances, marks already a notable advance over previous or more corrupted revelations, be construed as placing upon an unassailable basis the undoubted authority with which Muhammad had, verbally and on several occasions, invested his successor? Can the author of the Bahá'í dispensation, however much he may have succeeded through the provisions of the Persian Bayan in averting a schism as permanent and catastrophic as those that afflicted Christianity and Islam, can he be said to have produced instruments for the safeguarding of his faith as definite and efficacious as those which must for all time preserve the unity of the organized followers of the faith of Baha'u'lláh? Alone of all the revelations gone before it, this faith has, through the explicit directions, the repeated warnings, the authenticated safeguards incorporated and elaborated in its teachings, succeeded in raising a structure which the bewildered followers of bankrupt and broken creeds might well approach and critically examine, and seek, ere it is too late, the invulnerable security of its world-embracing shelter. No wonder that he who through the operation of his will has inaugurated so vast and unique an order, and who is the center of so mighty a covenant, should have written these words: So firm and mighty is this covenant, that from the beginning of time until the present day, no religious dispensation hath produced its like. Whatsoever is latent in the innermost of this holy circle, he wrote during the darkest and most dangerous days of his ministry, shall gradually appear and be made manifest, for now is but the beginning of its growth and the dayspring of the revelation of its signs. Fear not, are his reassuring words foreshadowing the rise of the administrative order established by his will. Fear not if this branch be severed from this material world and cast aside its leaves. Nay, the leaves thereof shall flourish, for this branch will grow after it is cut off from this world below. It shall reach the loftiest pinnacles of glory, and it shall bear such fruits as will perfume the world with their fragrance. To what else, if not to the power and majesty which this administrative order, the rudiments of the future all-enfolding Baha'i commonwealth, is destined to manifest, can these utterances of Baha'u'lláh allude? The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. The Bab himself, in the course of his references to him whom God will make manifest, anticipates the system and glorifies the world order which the revelation of Baha'u'lláh is destined to unfold. Well is it with him, is his remarkable statement in the 3rd chapter of the Persian Bayan, who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Baha'u'lláh, and rendereth thanks unto his Lord, for he will assuredly be made manifest. God hath indeed irrevocably ordained it in the Bayan. In the tablets of Baha'u'lláh, where the institutions of the international and local houses of justice are specifically designated and formally established, in the institution of the hands of the cause of God, which first Baha'u'lláh and then Abdul-Baha brought into being, in the institution of both local and national assemblies, which in their embryonic stage were already functioning in the days preceding Abdul-Baha's ascension, and the authority with which the author of our faith and the center of his covenant have in their tablets chosen to confer upon them, in the institution of the local fund which operated according to Abdul-Baha's specific injunctions addressed to certain assemblies in Persia, in the verses of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the implications of which clearly anticipate the institution of the guardianship, in the explanation which Abdul-Baha in one of his tablets has given to, and the emphasis he has placed upon, the hereditary principle and the law of primogeniture, as having been upheld by the prophets of the past. In these we can discern the faint glimmerings and discover the earliest intimation of the nature and working of the administrative order which the will of Abdul-Baha was at a later time destined to proclaim and formally establish. An attempt, I feel, should at the present juncture be made to explain the character and functions of the twin pillars that support this mighty administrative structure, the institutions of the guardianship and of the Universal House of Justice. To describe in their entirety the diverse elements that function in conjunction with these institutions is beyond the scope and purpose of this general exposition of the fundamental verities of the faith. To define with accuracy and minuteness the features and to analyze exhaustively the nature of the relationships which, on the one hand, bind together these two fundamental organs of the will of Abdul-Baha, and connect, on the other, each of them to the author of the faith and the center of his covenant, is a task which future generations will no doubt adequately fulfill. My present intention is to elaborate certain salient features of this scheme, which, however close we may stand to its colossal structure, are already so clearly defined that we find it inexcusable to either misconceive or ignore. It should be stated at the very outset, in clear and unambiguous language, that these twin institutions of the administrative order of Baha'u'lláh should be regarded as divine in origin, essential in their functions, and complementary in their aim and purpose. Their fundamental object is to ensure the continuity of the divinely appointed authority which flows from the source of our faith, to safeguard the unity of its followers, and to maintain the integrity and flexibility of its teachings. Acting in conjunction with each other, these two inseparable institutions administer its affairs, coordinate its activities, promote its interests, execute its laws, and defend its subsidiary institutions. Severally, each operates within a clearly defined sphere of jurisdiction. Each is equipped with its own attendant institutions, instruments designed for the effective discharge of its particular responsibilities and duties. Each exercises within the limitations imposed upon it its powers, its authority, its rights, and prerogatives. These are neither contradictory nor detract in the slightest degree from the position which each of these institutions occupies. Far from being incompatible or mutually destructive, they supplement each other's authority and functions, and are permanently and fundamentally united in their aims. Divorced from the institution of the guardianship, the world order of Baha'u'lláh would be mutilated and permanently deprived of that hereditary principle which, as Abdul-Baha has written, has been invariably upheld by the law of God. In all the divine dispensations, he states in a tablet addressed to the follower of the faith in Persia, the eldest son hath been given extraordinary distinctions. Even the station of prophethood hath been his birthright. Without such an institution, the integrity of the faith would be imperiled, and the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. Its prestige would suffer, the means required to enable it to take a long and uninterrupted view over a series of generations would be completely lacking, and the necessary guidance to define the sphere of the legislative action of its elected representatives would be totally withdrawn. Severed from the no less essential institution of the Universal House of Justice, this same system of the will of Abdu'l-Baha would be paralyzed in its action, and would be powerless to fill in those gaps which the author of the Kitab-i-Aqdas has deliberately left in the body of his legislative and administrative ordinances. He is the interpreter of the Word of God. Abdu'l-Baha, referring to the functions of the guardian of the faith, asserts, using in his will and testament the very term which he himself has chosen when refuting the arguments of the covenant breakers who had challenged his right to interpret the utterances of Abdu'l-Baha. After him, he adds, will succeed the firstborn of his lineal descendants. The mighty stronghold, he further explains, shall remain impregnable and safe through obedience to him who is a guardian of the cause of God. It is incumbent upon the members of the House of Justice, upon all the Afnan, the hands of the cause of God, to show their obedience, submissiveness, and subordination unto the guardian of the cause of God. It is incumbent upon the members of the House of Justice, Baha'u'lláh on the other hand declares in the 8th leaf of the Exalted Paradise, to take counsel together regarding those things which have not outwardly been revealed in the book, and to enforce that which is agreeable to them. God will verily inspire them with whatsoever he willeth, and he verily is the provider, the omniscient. Unto the most holy book, the Kitab-i-Aqdas, Abdu'l-Baha states in his will, every one must turn, and all that is not expressly recorded therein must be referred to the Universal House of Justice. That which this body, whether unanimously or by a majority, doth carry, that is verily the truth and the purpose of God himself. Whoso doth deviate therefrom is verily of them that love discord, hath shown forth malice, and turned away from the Lord of the Covenant. Not only does Abdu'l-Baha confirm in his will Baha'u'llah's above-quoted statement, but invests this body with the additional right and power to abrogate, according to the exigencies of time, its own enactments, as well as those of a preceding House of Justice. Inasmuch as the House of Justice, is his explicit statement in his will, hath power to enact laws that are not expressly recorded in the book, and bear upon daily transactions, so also it hath power to repeal the same. Thus it can do, because the laws form no part of the divine explicit text. Referring to both the Guardian and the Universal House of Justice, we read these emphatic words. The sacred and youthful branch, the guardian of the cause of God, as well as the Universal House of Justice, to be universally elected and established, are both under the care and protection of the Abha Beauty, under the shelter and unerring guidance of the Exalted One, the Bab. May my life be offered up for them both. Whatsoever they decide is of God. From these statements it is made indubitably clear and evident that the guardian of the faith hath been made the interpreter of the Word, and that the Universal House of Justice has been invested with the function of legislating on matters not expressly revealed in the teachings. The interpretation of the guardian, functioning within his own sphere, is as authoritative and binding as the enactments of the International House of Justice, whose exclusive right and prerogative is to pronounce upon and deliver the final judgment on such laws and ordinances as Baha'u'lláh has not expressly revealed. Neither can, nor will ever, infringe upon the sacred and prescribed domain of the other. Neither will seek to curtail the specific and undoubted authority with which both have been divinely invested. Though the guardian of the faith has been made the permanent head of so august a body, he can never, even temporarily, assume the right of exclusive legislation. He cannot override the decision of the majority of his fellow members, but is bound to insist upon a reconsideration by them of any enactment he conscientiously believes to conflict with the meaning and to depart from the spirit of Baha'u'llah's revealed utterances. He interprets what has been specifically revealed, and cannot legislate except in his capacity as member of the Universal House of Justice. He is debarred from laying down independently the constitution that must govern the organized activities of his fellow members, and from exercising his influence in a manner that would encroach upon the liberty of those whose sacred right is to elect the body of his collaborators. It should be borne in mind that the institution of the guardianship has been anticipated by Abdu'l-Baha in an allusion he made in a tablet addressed, long before his own ascension, to 3 of his friends in Persia. To their question as to whether there would be any person to whom all the Baha'is would be called upon to turn after his ascension, he made the following reply, quote, As to the question ye have asked me, Know verily that this is a well-guarded secret. It is even as a gem concealed within its shell. That it will be revealed is predestined. The time will come when its light will appear, when its evidences will be made manifest, and its secrets unraveled." End quote. Dearly beloved friends, exalted as is the position and vital as is the function of the institution of the guardianship in the administrative order of Baha'u'lláh, and staggering as must be the weight of responsibility which it carries, its importance must, whatever be the language of the will, be in no wise overemphasized. The guardian of the faith must not under any circumstances, and whatever his merits or his achievements, be exalted to the rank that will make him a co-sharer with Abdu'l-Baha in the unique position which the center of the covenant occupies, much less to the station exclusively ordained for the manifestation of God. So grave a departure from the established tenets of our faith is nothing short of open blasphemy. As I have already stated in the course of my references to Abdu'l-Baha's station, however great the gulf that separates him from the author of a divine revelation, it can never measure with the distance that stands between him who is the center of Baha'u'llah's covenant and the guardians, who are his chosen ministers. There is a far, far greater distance separating the guardian from the center of the covenant than there is between the center of the covenant and its author. No guardian of the faith, I feel it my solemn duty to place on record, can ever claim to be the perfect exemplar of the teachings of Baha'u'lláh, or the stainless mirror that reflects his light. Though overshadowed by the unfailing, the unerring protection of Baha'u'lláh and of the Bab, and however much he may share with Abdu'l-Baha the right and obligation to interpret the Baha'i teachings, he remains essentially human and cannot, if he wishes to remain faithful to his trust, arrogate to himself under any pretense whatsoever the rights, the privileges, and prerogatives which Baha'u'lláh has chosen to confer upon his son. In the light of this truth, to pray to the guardian of the faith, to address him as Lord and Master, to designate him as His Holiness, to seek his benediction, to celebrate his birthday, or to commemorate any event associated with his life would be tantamount to a departure from those established truths that are enshrined within our beloved faith. The fact that the guardian has been specifically endowed with such power as he may need to reveal the purport and disclose the implications of the utterances of Baha'u'lláh and of Abdu'l-Baha does not necessarily confer upon him a station co-equal with those words he is called upon to interpret. He can exercise that right and discharge this obligation, and yet remain infinitely inferior to both of them in rank and different in nature. To the integrity of this cardinal principle of our faith, the words, the deeds of its present and future guardians must abundantly testify. By their conduct and example, they must needs establish its truth upon an unassailable foundation, and transmit to future generations unimpeachable evidences of its reality. For my own part, to hesitate in recognizing so vital a truth, or to vacillate in proclaiming so firm a conviction, must constitute a shameless betrayal of the confidence reposed in me by Abdu'l-Baha, and an unpardonable usurpation of the authority with which he himself has been invested. A word should now be said regarding the theory on which this administrative order is based, and the principle that must govern the operation of its chief institutions. It would be utterly misleading to attempt a comparison between this divinely conceived order and any of the diverse systems which the minds of men at various periods of their history have contrived for the government of human institutions. Such an attempt would in itself betray a lack of complete appreciation of the excellence of the handiwork of its great author. How could it be otherwise when we remember that this order constitutes the very pattern of that divine civilization which the almighty law of Baha'u'lláh is designed to establish upon earth? The diverse and ever-shifting systems of human polity, whether past or present, whether originating in the East or in the West, offer no adequate criterion wherewith to establish the potency of its hidden virtues or to appraise the solidity of its foundations. The Baha'i Commonwealth of the future, of which this vast administrative order is the sole framework, is, both in theory and practice, not only unique in the entire history of political institutions, but can find no parallel in the annals of any of the world's recognized religious systems. No form of democratic government, no system of autocracy or of dictatorship, whether monarchical or republican, no intermediary scheme of a purely aristocratic order, nor even of any of the recognized types of theocracy, whether it be the Hebrew Commonwealth or the various Christian ecclesiastical organizations, or the imamate or the caliphate in Islam. None of these can be identified or be said to conform with the administrative order which the master hand of its perfect architect has fashioned. This newborn administrative order incorporates within its structure certain elements which are to be found in each of the three recognized forms of secular government, without being in any sense a mere replica of any one of them, and without introducing within its machinery any of the objectionable features which they inherently possess. It blends and harmonizes, as no government fashioned by mortal hands has as yet accomplished, the salutary truths which each of these systems undoubtedly contains, without vitiating the integrity of those God-given verities on which it is ultimately founded. The administrative order of the faith of Baha'u'lláh must in no wise be regarded as purely democratic in character, inasmuch as the basic assumption which requires all democracies to depend fundamentally upon getting their mandate from the people is altogether lacking in this dispensation. In the conduct of the administrative affairs of the faith, in the enactment of the legislation necessary to supplement the laws of the Kitab-i-Aqdas, the members of the Universal House of Justice, it should be borne in mind, are not, as Baha'u'llah's utterances clearly imply, responsible to those whom they represent, nor are they allowed to be governed by the feelings, the general opinion, and even the convictions of the mass of the faithful, or of those who directly elect them. They are to follow in a prayerful attitude the dictates and promptings of their conscience. They may, indeed they must, acquaint themselves with the conditions prevailing among the community, must weigh dispassionately in their minds the merits of any case presented for their consideration, but must reserve for themselves the right of an unfettered decision. God will verily inspire them with whatsoever He willeth, is Baha'u'llah's incontrovertible assurance. They, and not the body of those who either directly or indirectly elect them, have thus been made the recipients of the divine guidance, which is at once the lifeblood and ultimate safeguard of this revelation. Moreover, he who symbolizes the hereditary principle in this dispensation has been made the interpreter of the words of its author, and ceases consequently, by virtue of the actual authority vested in him, to be the figurehead invariably associated with the prevailing systems of constitutional monarchies. Nor can the Baha'i administrative order be dismissed as a hard and rigid system of unmitigated autocracy, or as an idle imitation of any form of absolutistic ecclesiastical government, whether it be the papacy, the imamate, or any other similar institution, for the obvious reason that upon the international elected representatives of the followers of Baha'u'lláh has been conferred the exclusive right of legislating on matters not expressly revealed in the Baha'i writings. Neither the guardian of the faith, nor any institution apart from the International House of Justice, can ever usurp this vital and essential power of or encroach upon that sacred right. The abolition of professional priesthood, with its accompanying sacraments of baptism, of communion, and of confession of sins, the laws requiring the election of universal suffrage of all local, national, and international houses of justice, the total abstinence of episcopal authority with its attendant privileges, corruptions, and bureaucratic tendencies are further evidences of the non-autocratic character of the Baha'i administrative order, and of its inclination to democratic methods in the administration of its affairs. Nor is this order identified with the name of Baha'u'lláh to be confused with any system of purely aristocratic government, in view of the fact that it upholds on the one hand the hereditary principle, and entrusts the guardian of the faith with the obligations of interpreting its teachings, and provides on the other for the free and direct election from among the masses of the faithful of the body that constitutes its highest legislative organ. Whereas this administrative order cannot be said to have been molded after any of these recognized systems of government, it nevertheless embodies, reconciles, and assimilates within its framework such wholesome elements as are to be found in each one of them. The hereditary authority which the guardian is called upon to exercise, the vital and essential functions which the Universal House of Justice discharges, the specific provisions requiring its democratic election by the representatives of the faithful, these combine to demonstrate the truth that this divinely revealed order, which can never be identified with any of the standard types of government referred to by Aristotle in his works, embodies and blends with the spiritual verities on which it is based the beneficent elements which are to be found in each one of them. The admitted evils inherent in each of these systems being rigidly and permanently excluded, this unique order, however long it may endure, and however extensive its ramifications, cannot ever degenerate into any form of despotism, of oligarchy, or of demagogy, which must sooner or later corrupt the machinery of all man-made and essentially defective political institutions. Dearly beloved friends, significant as are the origins of this mighty administrative structure, and however unique its features, the happenings that may be said to have heralded its birth and signalized the initial stage of its evolution seem no less remarkable. How striking, how edifying the contrast between the process of slow and steady consolidation that characterizes the growth of its infant strength, and the devastating onrush of the forces of disintegration that are assailing the outworn institutions, both religious and secular, of present-day society. The vitality which the organic institutions of this ever-expanding order so strongly exhibit, the obstacles which the high courage, the undaunted resolution of its administrators have already surmounted, the fire of an unquenchable enthusiasm that glows with undiminished fervor in the hearts of its itinerant teachers, the heights of self-sacrifice which its champion builders are now attaining, the breath of wisdom, the confident hope, the creative joy, the inward peace, the uncompromising integrity, the exemplary discipline, the unyielding unity and solidarity which its stalwart defenders manifest, the degree to which its moving spirit has shown itself capable of assimilating the diversified elements within its pale, of cleansing them of all forms of prejudice and of infusing them with its own structure, these are evidences of a power which a disillusioned and sadly shaken society can ill afford to ignore. Compare these splendid manifestations of the Spirit animating this vibrant body of the faith of Baha'u'lláh with the cries and agony, the follies and vanities, the bitterness and prejudices, the wickedness and divisions of an ailing and chaotic world. Witness the fear that torments its leaders and paralyzes the actions of its blind and bewildered statesmen. How fierce the hatreds, how false the ambitions, how petty the pursuits, how deep-rooted the suspicions of its peoples, how disquieting the lawlessness, the corruption, the unbelief that are eating into the vitals of a tottering civilization. Might not this process of steady deterioration which is insidiously invading so many departments of human activity and thought be regarded as a necessary accompaniment to the rise of this almighty arm of Baha'u'lláh? Might we not look upon the momentous happenings which, in the course of the past 20 years, have so deeply agitated every continent of the earth as ominous signs simultaneously proclaiming the agonies of a disintegrating civilization and the birth pangs of that world order, that ark of human salvation that must needs arise upon its ruins? The catastrophic fall of mighty monarchies and empires in the European continent, allusions to some of which may be found in the prophecies of Baha'u'lláh, the decline that has set in and is still continuing in the fortunes of the Shia hierarchy in his own native land, the fall of the Qajar dynasty, the traditional enemy of his faith, the overthrow of the Sultanate and Caliphate, the sustaining pillars of Sunni Islam, to which the destruction of Jerusalem in the latter part of the 1st century of the Christian era offers a striking parallel, the wave of secularization which is invading the Mohammedan ecclesiastical institutions in Egypt and sapping the loyalty of its staunchest supporters, the humiliating blows that have afflicted some of the most powerful churches of Christendom in Russia, in Western Europe and Central America, the dissemination of those subversive doctrines that are undermining the foundations and overthrowing the structure of seemingly impregnable strongholds in the political and social spheres of human activity, the signs of an impending catastrophe, strangely reminiscent of the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, which threatens to engulf the whole structure of present-day civilization, all witness to the tumult which the birth of this mighty organ of the religion of Baha'u'lláh has cast into the world, a tumult which will grow in scope and intensity as the implications of this constantly evolving scheme are more fully understood and its ramifications more widely extended over the surface of the globe. A word more in conclusion. The rise and establishment of this administrative order, the shell that shields and enshrines so precious a gem, constitutes the hallmark of the second and formative age of the Baha'i era. It will come to be regarded, as it recedes farther and farther from our eyes, as the chief agency empowered to usher in the concluding phase, the consummation of this glorious dispensation. Let no one, while the system is still in its infancy, misconceive its character, belittle its significance, or misrepresent its purpose. The bedrock on which this administrative order is founded is God's immutable purpose for mankind in this day. The source from which it derives its inspiration is no one less than Baha'u'lláh himself. Its shield and defender are the embattled hosts of the Ata kingdom. Its seed is the blood of no less than 20,000 martyrs who have offered up their lives that it may be born and flourish. The axis round which its institutions revolve are the authentic provisions of the will and testament of Abdul-Baha. Its guiding principles are the truth which he who is the unerring interpreter of the teachings of our faith has so clearly enunciated in his public addresses throughout the West. The laws that govern its operation and limit its functions are those which have been expressly ordained in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. The seat round which its spiritual, its humanitarian, and administrative activities will cluster are the magical ashkar and its dependencies. The pillars that sustain its authority and buttress its structure are the twin institutions of the guardianship and of the universal house of justice. The central, the underlying aim which animates it is the establishment of the New World Order as enumerated by Baha'u'lláh. The method it employs, the standard it inculcates, incline it to neither east nor west, neither Jew nor Gentile, neither rich nor poor, neither white nor colored. Its watchword is the unification of the human race, its standard the most great peace, its consummation the advent of that golden millennium, the day when the kingdoms of this world shall have become the kingdom of God himself, the kingdom of Baha'u'lláh. Shoghi Effendi, Haifa, Palestine, February 8, 1934.